Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Unity Center of Light, a spiritual community that nurtures the growth of all who are seeking to grow their spirit, mind, and body. Welcome, welcome. Today is Sunday, August the 14th, and another blessed day in our consciousness, as our friend Paul Hasselbeck likes to say. We're really privileged today to have Reverend Kelly Isola with us, and you'll be hearing more about her in just a few minutes. But I'd like to invite you guys to join me for yeah, sorry it didn't want to come up after I just showed it to you, for our mission and our foundation statements. So please join me. I'll know that you're participating if your lips are moving, don't forget. The mission of Unity Center of Light is to empower individuals to express their indwelling divine potential. We teach there is a power within each of us far greater than anything that exists outside of us. And our foundation statement, there is only one power and one presence active in my life and affairs, God the good, omnipotent. And so it is. So now I'd like to invite Kathleen Bailey to share with us the daily word for today.
Good morning, Unity family. Word for today is holy. I discover holiness in everywhere and in everyone. There are certain places I visit where the presence of God feels especially near, places that feel holy. These may include churches and other houses of worship, shrines, favorite places in nature, any destination where I become vitally aware of the divine presence is a holy ground. I remember the words from the Prayer for Protection by Unity poet James Dillard Freeman. Quote, "Wherever I am, God is," end quote. The divine presence I know lives within me. It is the true essence of my life and every life. Today, my understanding expands. I discover the divine presence all around me and find holiness everywhere. Every person is a holy being. Every place is holy ground. And from Genesis 28:16, when Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it." Peace.
Thank you, Kathleen. All right, so it's my great good pleasure this morning to introduce Reverend Kelly Isola. We put a hefty bio of her in our e-newsletter the last couple of weeks because she's up to so much, and I just didn't have the heart to cut almost any of it out. So I'm sure we'll hear more about her adventures in ministry and consciousness as she shares with us today. I don't know about you guys, but I was intrigued by her title when she shared it with me. I'll let you tell her more about that. I want to invite Kelly to share with us today. We look forward to it. Welcome.
Thank you. Yes, Hippo Birdie to you. Hippo Birdie to you, Charles Fillmore. I am kind of known for, that's, the core message for me is the one thing I want you to remember from a talk, and I very often use those as titles. So on purpose, I called it Hippo Birdie to you, Charles Fillmore, for a couple of reasons. One, if you say it really fast, well, let me back up. If you're familiar with the cartoonist Gary Larson and the cartoon The Far Side, he, and if you're not, Dr. Google it, he's absolutely hysterical. He draws cartoons of animals, but they're mimicking people. And it's a wonderful way to poke fun at us. Because frankly, humans are silly and scary and bizarre and intriguing and confounding, or like a giant enigma rolled up into a conundrum, kind of thing. So he pokes fun at humans and how we be, and I think that's important to do, right? Just before we started talking about silliness, I love silliness. So I used that term, Hippo Birdie, to use, because if you say it fast enough, and it comes from Gary Larson, what I'm really saying is happy birthday. Happy birthday, Charles Fillmore. Hippo Birdie to you, Charles Fillmore. His birthday is August 22nd. Myrtle Fillmore's birthday is August 6th. So each year, if I speak during August, I like to talk about either one of them. So today is Charles Fillmore's turn. Last year, I think it was Myrtle's turn. And the Hippo Birdie to you is also to remind us that, when we hear something, that we can often go, wait, what? Did you just say hippo? Did I hear you in there, like EWE, sheep? Well, like what? But when we hear something or we're told something, that to really take on, wait, what? What did I hear? And that not everything is as it seems. Not everything we hear is really to just take on and go, oh, okay, which is how Charles Fillmore, co-founder of Unity, kind of how he operated. It wasn't he was, he researched whatever he could. He and Myrtle came from hugely different backgrounds, very, very different backgrounds, and both valued the intellect, both of them, Myrtle more so than Charles, actually. And they valued like doing your own research, like taking on what you're learning and really metabolizing it. And what does it mean for me? And how does this show up in my life? Not just here's what you need to believe and go on your merry way. Myrtle actually was raised in a family like that and pushed back hard. Charles was raised on an Indian reservation, a Chippewa Indian reservation, with no connection to Western religion at all, and raised very, very differently. So open to new things, open to new thoughts, open to new ideas. So the Hippo Birdie to you is a way for you to remember that when you hear something, to just kind of go, I wonder what that means, and to take it on and to question everything. I think that's one of the gifts that we have been given, not just but by both of the co-founders, Myrtle and Charles, is our capacity to research, right? Our capacity to take something on, to turn on the critical thinking and ask a lot of questions about it. We should be questioning our questions. And sometimes why ruin a good question with an answer? So today, for me, to honor Charles Fillmore, co-founder, and to do honor, and for me to pay an enormous amount of respect, keeping in mind he didn't always get it right, to bring him down out of the clouds and off the pedestal a little bit and put him into my world, because like you and I, he was a spiritual seeker that was working his stuff out, right? He was working his stuff out in his talks. He actually didn't write much. Most of the books that we read are written by others that just transcribed his talks. And yet there's a whole lot there. The fact that, he has 3 definitions for divine order tells me that he's working his stuff out, tells me that he doesn't land somewhere forever and concretize it, right? And cretalize it and just, this is it. He and Myrtle Fillmore for years were asked, well, what does Unity believe? What does Unity think? What is Unity's, people were looking for, here's the list, here's the bullet points, here's what you need to know. And they largely pushed back. And because they refer to Unity as a living religion, as a philosophy, right? Which is something that's always in motion, something that's always emerging, that's always evolving. And one of the things that they as people were wanting to know, well, what do you want? What is Unity about? What is Unity about? Tell us more about it. Eventually, what happened in Unity in 1921 is they did put out a statement of faith, which had 32 statements, and it was boiled down to 5 principles over time. But at the very beginning, when Unity began in 1889, they wrote in the very first issue of Modern Thought magazine, which is now we know as Unity magazine. But in the very first issue, they said that the influx of new thought is always necessary to life. And he who writes a creed or puts a limit to revelation is the enemy of humanity. Creeds have ever been the vampires that suck the blood of spiritual progress in the past, and life can only be kept in the present moment by latitude of thought, tempered always by the power that moves the world, love. So I want to go back to the beginning of that and just say a little bit about, again, think Hippo, Birdie, 2 U's, right? Is this something new? Is this something different? Is it a little bit, oh, I haven't heard this from something like this from Charles Fillmore before. But the beginning part about that influx of new thought, that's I believe each one of us has this, as spiritual seekers, always endeavoring for new ideas. And here's what I believe about new ideas and having new thought, this influx, right? Think like, a river, or a lake or something. There's an inlet and an outlet, right? There's always new ideas coming in, and we never want to put a limit on whatever revelation occurs for us, because I don't know what is being, what is occurring for you. And then, of course, the favorite part that people really like is calling creeds the vampires that suck the blood of spiritual progress. And I think it's a strong way of saying, like, don't stick it in concrete, which sometimes we have a habit of doing in Unity. Sometimes I hear people say, well, Unity believes this, as though it's set in stone. And I encourage us to remember Hippo, Birdie, 2 U's, what's behind? Well, is there something else? There's a whole lot of material of Charles and Myrtle Fillmore's that's in the archives that most people have never read, which is where you get to see this evolution of thought. You get to see ideas that contradict each other. You get to see ideas that didn't quite pan out. And that's why I think it's important to sometimes talk about this stuff, to see what we hear and kind of go, I'm not sure about that. Or sometimes you hear something new and go, oh, that's what I've been feeling inside, and there's some words for it. But it's the last part of this quote that really is one of my favorite things, is that life can only be kept right here and now by latitude of thought, which means we need to open up our brain, right? We need to open our thinking, tempered always by the power that moves the world, love. So it doesn't mean don't have new ideas. And hopefully, latitude of thought mean expanding our worldview, expanding our thoughts, expanding what we believe, deconstructing what we believe is uncomfortable. It's supposed to be. That's the very nature of the spiritual journey, that there's some discomfort, right? It's called chemicalization in Unity, is the technical term. When new ideas bump up against our current consciousness, we kind of bump up. It's called chemicalization, right? So a new thought comes in, and it kind of triggers or messes with what we've already had in place. And I don't know about you, but I've had the experience sometimes where I think I'm so done self-reflecting. I don't want to self-reflect anymore. Just tell me what to think, tell me what to believe, and I'm good to go on my way. And it's just not, that may last for a few minutes, a day, a week, but honestly, my role, and I think all of our roles, are to just continue to have latitude of thought, especially in times that are so difficult. Latitude of thought, just expanding, being able to expand what I can take in, even and especially when it's uncomfortable, especially when it bumps up against something that we're not familiar with, that is new, that seems counter to what I believe, that may rattle my foundation a little bit. And just remember the Hippo, Birdie, 2 U. Just, wait, what was that? Say that again, and allow it to come in and allow it to stretch us. I met you. If you can hear my cat, I'm his staff, and I'm home from vacation, and he's meowing very loudly. So if you can hear him, he's adding his thought to this discussion. When I mentioned the Unity, the Modern Thought magazine, and that input, and I had said that the Statement of Faith, Unity Statement of Faith, came out in 1921. Later, that evolved into what we call the 5 principles. I call them one principle, four practices. And the one principle is that there's one presence and one power. That's it. An interesting thing that to take on about that, you know, and lots of people have their understanding and belief and practice of what that means for them. And I want to add another piece. I want to add another one of those Hippo Birdie to you. Charles Fillmore says at a healing back in what was it, 1918, back at a healing service, he says there's one power. There's but one power, and we use it as we will. So we are using power, right? We are using principle. We are using God. That's what he's saying. Those are all synonyms for God: divine mind, divine idea, God, principle, one power, one presence, that all mean the same thing. And he says we will use it as we will. Here's the important part. If we send it out by our thoughts and words in hate, it destroys. But if we send it out in love, it builds. There are not two powers, but two ways of using that power. So let me say that again for you. There's one power. We use it as we will. If we send it out by our thought and word in hate, it destroys. But if we send it out in love, it builds. There are not two powers. There are two ways of using one power. I know that for some people that can be a little challenging because we can tend to look at that one power. And you said it at the very opening, right? The one presence and one power. We tend to think of that one power, that principle, capital P principle, as something that is, quote unquote, we even say it, good, quote unquote, good. As opposed, unconsciously what goes on for most people though is that if there's a good, there's a bad. But that isn't how Myrtle meant it when she first said, God the good. Principle and all unity principles, including the 12 powers, right? Think about the 12 powers. They're all neutral. We use those powers as we see fit. We use those powers to destroy, or we use them to build up. We send it out in hate or anger or unforgiveness, or we can send it out in love. We can send it out in kindness. We can send it out in compassion to build. And we do that. Look around. The same power. It's the same power. There are not two different powers. It's how we use it. So I'm just going to leave that one with you because it can be a little, excuse me, it can be a little bit, that's one of those I think for some people is really like, hey, wait a minute, that's a definite Hippo Birdie to you. So for some people, we've been taught that God is, you know, always is comfortable, right? Always is that feeling of love, always is good, you know. And I think if we can move ourselves into the idea that principle is neutral and we decide how we use it, it makes it even more powerful. There's more of a responsibility for us to, you know, about what kind of world we want to be in and how we're showing up in our world. And remember the last quote I said is that it's that, you know, we stay in the present moment with that latitude of thought, right? And we have this latitude of thought tempered by the power that moves the world, love. And so here's another way to think about that. We generally, when we read Charles Fillmore, he quotes scripture, as does Myrtle. The funny thing about it is if you read a lot of their material, and most all of it is in the archives and not really accessible to the general public, they tend to quote the same scriptures. I think they had some favorites of their own. And Charles Fillmore does often quote scripture, and so do ministers, right? Some ministers, you know, weekly have some scripture. At the end of daily word, there's always scripture. And yet, what's fascinating is that at one point, he said this about scripture. I think sometimes we would get along a little faster in our understanding of the absolute truth if we quit this constant quotation of scripture. Well, the first time I read that, I went, well, Hippo Birdie to you? Like what? Because everything I had read, there seemed to always be some kind of scripture in there. And for me, he's pointing me to there's more, right? He's pointing me to what's behind the curtain, right? The Bible is the oldest assembly of writings in existence today. It really is an outpicturing of the social, political, religious, cultural, geographical consciousness history of people. It's the foundation for three major religions, the Abrahamic faiths. The Bible just won't go away. It's actually the best-selling book in the world and the least read. It's very inconsistent in its portrayal of God. It has disturbing violence in it. It has a lot of historical inaccuracies. Many, many books. There's always people writing books about it. And yet the Bible has survived, over the years. And there's many, many, many translations of it. And none of them are accurate. Some are more than others. In Unity, we tend to use the NRSV because it's a translation that is, biblical scholars from lots of faiths got together and went back to the original text, the Hebrew and Greek texts, and, translated them. And we still have to just Hippo Birdie to you, right? Take it in. And what's the context of this? So I think that's what Charles Fillmore is inviting us into. He had a respect for scripture because he studied it. He also studied other scripture. Myrtle Fillmore even quotes the sutras in some of her writings that aren't published. So I know they were reading sacred scripture. And I think what he's asking us to do is don't get stuck in that. Like, don't make the Bible your God. He's inviting us into that. Wait, what? The Hippo Birdie to you. Wait, what was that? Don't quote scripture so much. To think for ourselves, to dive in, to metabolize, take a look at scripture, like go back and find out, what is it really saying? What does it really mean? Who wrote it? When? It's not what it seems. It's not what it seems. Coming back to the 5 principles, I mentioned earlier that, the Unity's statement of faith was actually 32 statements in 1921, and then they slowly kind of disappeared and evolved into what we call the 5 principles. And I call it one principle. There's one presence and one power, 4 practices. So how do we practice that? One presence and one power. And, similarly to what I said earlier about there's one power, but it's, how are we using it? The other thing that I want to keep in mind around that Charles Fillmore also said was that we use principle. We use God. God does not use us. We use principle. We use principle. It's sort of a corollary to that earlier one, but he says it very clearly, and he says it in the definition of God in the revealing word, that so if you think about how often you hear yourself in prayer or somebody else's prayer or in conversation, or, where we're kind of relinquishing our responsibility or relinquishing our power to, well, it's all in divine order, or something like, well, I'll have to pray to God, about that. I'll have to talk to God, flip it. Hippo Birdie to you, flip it. You use principle, not the other way around. God's using me for this and this and this. No, you're using God. That's our second, what's referred to as our second principle, but that's our practice, right? Is to use that principle and use it, as that earlier quote, to build, right? Use it to build the world that you want. Doesn't mean it's easy, doesn't mean it's comfortable. This is the sidebar to Hippo Birdie to you, which is why it's kind of one of those, wait, what? Because it's not comfortable. It's challenging you. That's the whole point of our spiritual journey, is to be challenged, not to just be given, here's a list of bullet items, get back to me when you've memorized them. Because that's not I don't believe, right, that's where our journey lies. It lies in questioning and questioning some more, trying things on. Maybe we try them on a little bit, maybe we try it on a lot and wear it and take a deep dive. But, always that movement, right? That latitude of thought tempered with love. So the last piece I want to leave you with is, again, these are just some of my favorites that really have supported me in understanding our co-founder, Charles Fillmore, much more, and bringing him down out of the clouds. And really, he's an equal for us, right? He and Myrtle were working out their stuff, just got laid down on paper and gave a lot of talks and wrote a lot of letters. They were probably more engaged with the material than maybe I am. I don't know, really taking on the principles, really practicing, but they were people just like you and me and working their stuff out. And when you read the decades of things written and said, you can see their evolution. And that's what I want to see. I want to see us evolve. I don't want to see us water anything down. I want to see us take the teachings and evolve them for today's world, not just spout, well, Charles Fillmore said this or Myrtle Fillmore said that. So Hippo Birdie to you, Charles Fillmore. And the last little piece I want to leave you with is, he says that God is individually formed in consciousness in each of us. God is individually formed in consciousness in each of us, which can sound a little opposite to the opening statement, there's one presence and one power, right? Wait, I thought there was just one. Now you're telling me that God is individually formed in the consciousness of each of us. Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Because when we say there's one presence and one power, what we're saying is that there's no spot. We've heard this phrase, I think we use it a lot in youth and family, but there's no spot that God is not, right? That principle is everywhere, always present, like nowhere and everywhere. And sometimes we can get a little distracted by language. Like the minute you try to explain something, it's gone, right? The minute we try to put language to something, we lose what we're trying to say. And that's the limitations of language. So what I want to impart by this, God is individually formed in the consciousness of each of us, is that each one of us there's no two consciousness alike, right? There's 4 functions to our consciousness. We have a thinking nature, feeling nature, sensing nature, which is the body sensing physical sensations, and our intuiting nature. And so everything that goes on in life that we filter from the outside, that emerges from inside, our own realization and our own imagination and our own internal learnings and awakenings, they're all formed in consciousness through our thinking, feeling, sensing, and intuiting natures. And so God is individually formed because those are all a little different for each one of us. Some of us have a thinking nature that is highly developed, but our feeling nature, not so much. So need a little work there. And any combination of the 4, they're always at work. And this is why, this is the ability that we have, every individual combines ideas of divine mind and makes each, there's an infinite number of combinations. So God is individually formed. It does not change at all the fact that there's one presence and one power, this itness, right, principle that we use, but we all use it a little differently and it's formed within us a little differently because no two consciousness are alike. I like to joke, this is one of my Hippo Birdie to use, there are many onenesses. There are many onenesses. So let's take the idea of Hippo Birdie to you, this one presence and one power, that God is individually formed, that maybe we would understand absolute truth a little better if we quit this constant quotation of scripture. Let's take some of these ideas that might be new, and let's just take them inside for a few moments. If you're comfortable, you can close your outer eyes. You can leave them open and maybe lower your gaze to something in front of you. But what I'm wanting us to do is just take a moment to reflect right? I threw a whole bunch of stuff at you, starting with the opening line, Hippo, Birdie, 2 U's. So when you hear that in your mind, right? And if you're on mute, say it out loud, Hippo, Birdie, 2 U. And what I'm wanting you to do first is just find the smile in that. Find the smile in Hippo, Birdie, 2 U's. There is an element of lightness. There is an element of silliness in it, which I want us to have, to not take ourselves quite so seriously all the time, and to remember that this is a journey of unfoldment. And without the joy, and without the silly, and without the smile, it gets hard. We have been gifted from our co-founders with the capacity to research, with the capacity to go within, to think critically, and to realize for ourselves absolute truth. To realize for ourselves God of our understanding. And just add a little bit of the Hippo, Birdie, 2 U lens to remember that there's always something a little bit more around the corner. There's always something to be heard that piques our interest, that challenges our conventional wisdom, that challenges, wait, this is not the unity I grew up with. This is not the unity I've been involved with. And just notice those thoughts. Take a deep breath in, exhale. Notice if there is a thought that has emerged this morning that might have been a little disturbing or uncomfortable. Maybe it was a something you heard that brought a smile. Maybe something that had you go, I need to find out more. We get curious. So when you think about what you heard, just find one thing that kind of emerges and comes to the forefront of your mind for whatever reason. And now let's filter that through our consciousness. Meaning, what are your thoughts around it? What is the thinking nature? What thoughts, what meaning making, what images? And just notice those. Don't change them. Just notice. Maybe you want to jot them down. And then let's move to our feeling nature. What emotions emerged for you? Surprise, confusion, delight, boredom, curiosity, gratitude. Just pick one or two feelings, emotions that emerged this morning. And now notice where, engage your sensing nature, meaning physically. Where in your body do you feel those two emotions? Or maybe just pick one. Is it in the belly? Is it in the heart space? Maybe the feet or the back. And then finally, we engage our intuitive nature. We allow our faculty of wisdom to emerge for the realization, the unexpected. And this is something you can sit with over and over when something new is presented into your day. Pause and move it through your thinking nature. What thoughts, what meaning making, what images do I hold? What emotions emerge? Where in my body am I feeling this? And what does my faculty of wisdom opening me to? Expanding my thought, right? Latitude, expanding my worldview. Knowing that it is good to be uncomfortable. It is good to deconstruct so we can reconstruct. So we can evolve what is so very, very foundational and rich and meaningful. About unity, we can evolve that. So take one more big deep breath. Take two. Inhale and exhale. And I just leave you with Hippo, Birdie to you, Charles Fillmore. And on August 22nd, we're all invited out for birthday cake. So go have a little party, get some of you together, have a birthday cake, and think new thoughts. Challenge conventional wisdom. Hippo, Birdie to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Kelly. Thank you very much.